Welcome to another episode of Pathway to Purpose. I wanted to show up here because I haven't done a podcast in a little bit, and I was feeling inspired to share some things here. And this one's called How Men's Struggles Reveal the Life That They Were Never Meant to Live, and the path back to themselves. So there's a pattern I continue to see with men I work with every day. These are not men who are failing. They've really built something strong. They're disciplined, they're responsible, and often respected in their careers, families, and communities. And from the outside, their lives appear stable, even successful. And yet, underneath the surface, many of them describe that something feels off. It just feels like it's like alone and like not connected to themselves. I call it feeling a little disconnected. The experience is really more common than people realize. And it's really reflected in a conversation I'm having around men's mental health, their identity, and their emotional well-being. And what I love about the conversations that I've been having is learning really what's going on the inside, because men have really suppressed lots of parts of themselves in ways that have kept them from becoming or being who they are. They're performing roles and doing things to that they think they should do. Right? Studies show that men are significantly less likely to express emotional distress, seek support, and they often internalize this pressure that leads to withdrawal, burnout, and silent suffering. And I call it silent suffering. And these challenges are affecting men in so many ways. And lots of times it's the women or the partners in their lives that often notice. And I share this in some of the men's spaces too, that men's greatest gifts can also be the things that work against them. Their strength and their resilience is the place that takes them to staying alone and trying to fix it by themselves for way too long. And often it shows up in how they're performing in their career, their business, and more importantly, their relationships. They things feel a little flatter, they're more emotionally disconnected. And what's really happening is men are often not really sharing what's going on the inside. And actually, the things that their women crave for is them to be connect and them to be alive again. I call it alive because it feels like they have lost parts of themselves. So, when I began to look more closely at it, I started to notice the struggles that men face aren't random or isolated. They follow patterns and patterns that point to deeper I call it internal fragmentation, where there's just parts of themselves, they fragmented themselves and not fully connected here. I put this in a theory that I wrote called the restorative masculine integration theory, and it explores really how men suppress, kind of fragment, and adapt parts of themselves to survive the expectation and pressure in society. And I've seen it more and more where men are more, I don't want to say lost, but in the younger generation become chameleons because it wasn't okay to express some of the things. And we're not talking, I hate to use the word toxic masculinity, but I do because there's this extreme where, you know, and I think it's been something that's been talked about so much, and men are so afraid of it. They're afraid to actually express real masculinity because it's such a blurred place, right? And it's over time that this happens. So men don't really lose themselves all at once. They've lacked a lot of different role models growing up. We've grown up now in a society where it may not feel really acceptable to really step into those spaces. And actually, the very thing that men are afraid of are the things that they need to help grow. Okay. So, how these patterns often show up, oftentimes the guys I talk to aren't fully able to really understand or articulate it. It just shows up in what feels wrong, but they feel it every day. So that shows up in ways that are easy to dismiss, but they're hard to ignore at the same time. So there's this quiet numbness, like nothing really excites them anymore. There's this constant need to stay productive and just feel okay. A mind that won't shut off, always analyzing, always questioning, irritability that really doesn't match the situation, pulling away from people they actually care about, starting strong and then losing momentum without really understanding why, and a deep exhaustion that rest doesn't fix. And there's this lingering like sense that something important is missing. So these are the things that have been showing up for men. They're not random issues. They're signals. They're signals that something deeper is out of alignment. And if you sit with some of these men long enough and you listen to their words, you start to hear it. Not what they say, but what they mean. They really don't say, "Hey, I want emotional integration," or "I want identity alignment." Like that doesn't like come out. It's they're starting to say things like, "I just want to feel clear again. I want to feel like myself. I don't know, but something feels off. I should be happy, but I'm not. I want more confidence. I don't like, you know, what's going on in my world, or I don't feel like I know my purpose." And it's interesting when I run some of my master classes and some of the groups, I often ask the guys like, "Why are you here? What do you really want?" And a lot of the guys say, "I want peace. I just want to feel some peace. I want to feel like I have my purpose back or purpose, or I want to feel more confident." And those are some things. So if that's sitting with you and it's hitting and landing, that's a good signal. It's understanding that, hey, let me do something about it. But what happens is men get caught up in what I call the masks, and you'll start to learn some of the masks as I start to share in the next couple podcasts as we start to launch some of these masks that I've really put together that kind of illustrate some of the I call them the masks that men wear, and they're things that men have adopted. It's not their personality, it's either they suppress themselves or something they do. And I call it, like, for example, a tough guy mask. They act tough, but underneath, there's some place there that they feel really insecure. Or I call the avoider, or the avoider is just doesn't want to talk about it, right? So there's so many different masks, and they're not there to diagnose or treat. They're more from an educational perspective to just notice what's going on, right? So I wanted to share a little bit about that. I didn't want to go off on a tangent, but often guys are like, I need to fix this, right? And that could actually be another mask. I need to fix it. But really what men need is starting to talk about it and starting to understand and get some clarity and really pull that together. And I think a lot of guys don't know how or want to ask for help. And that's one of the hardest things that men do, men have a hard time with, is asking for help. What I've found is when they start to connect with others, I would call solid or grounded men that are are really connected and feeling grounded and starting to understand more of who they are, it starts to become a blueprint for men to actually start to grow. I've watched men just by coming together in some private groups that I've run start to transform by just sharing and connecting with other men, saying, "Oh my God, you feel that too?" Or, "Oh, I thought I was the only one." It's that isolation that keeps us separated. And oftentimes, men don't spend time hanging out with other men. They're either working or spending time with their family or their wives, which is great, but there needs to be kind of the guy time, for lack of a better term. And what guys really want is starting to get some of that clarity, peace, and connection, and a life of purpose. And one of the things that I often talk about with men is I say this comment, and you'll hear me say it in a lot of things that I put. It's the greatness here is already inside. It just needs to be expressed and aligned. It's blocked, right? And that's a powerful thing. And when men are saying, I want my confidence, or I want to feel more confident, and also another big indicator is I feel like I'm looking for purpose. And there's a lot of misconceptions around that process of purpose. And I've really done a lot of work helping guys really reconnect here. And they start to learn that they haven't really connected to what they wanted because they've been so disconnected from themselves, from suppressing parts of themselves because it wasn't okay to do that in certain situations. So the guys that I really started to work with are already strong. They're thoughtful, they're capable, they're purpose driven a lot, but oftentimes they're looking for more information. They're trying to fix it and wind up getting more and more frustrated. So what's happening isn't really their lack of identity, it's loss of connection to it. And that restorative masculine integration theory, I call it RMIT for short, calls this fragmentation because we're fragmented into these parts. And where men start to live through roles instead of from his core, from who he really is. And a lot of the men's programs out there are often in these like, hey, more discipline, more pressure, more proving. Hey, do hard things. And I often say, I like doing hard things. I think guys really need to step into doing some things. But sometimes when this situation, and a lot of situations with men, is forcing more pressure into it, only doesn't make it any better. What happens is you need to really connect and start to align. And most coaching programs and guy programs are really forced on more to do, more success, more push, rather than more connect and learn and grow internally. Do I think we need to do some things that push us? 100%. But I also think that we need to start to look at things more strategically. And the work that I've helped men with in this space has been really powerful as they start to reconnect themselves. And um, and I think many men feel like there's something wrong that, hey, I could fix this. And I think the biggest challenge, and I mentioned this earlier, is that they're like, let me fix this and fix it alone so nobody knows, or I'm fine, I got this. That's like the thing that men say, and they it kind of holds them back more often than not, is saying, hey, oh, I got this. Yeah. And the hardest thing that men can say is, I need help. I need to connect with my brothers. I need to talk and work things through. So, and it's the messaging that we have received as men that really keep us stuck. Because I always say it, there's this man's book that we're trying to all kind of figure out that nobody knows the playbook, right? That we think we know, right? And oftentimes, a lot of the people I talk to aren't looking for some like quick fix, another mindset hack. Let me do this. They're really starting to look for something deeper that's going to help them grow and transform, not just something that's going to pump them up or some temporary motivation, because that goes away. Have you ever started a workout plan or something like that, and you're motivated for the first maybe week, 2 weeks, or even a month, give yourself that, right? And then you're back and you've almost broken commitments to yourself. Not that you did. And that starts to erode here on that inner stuff that you need. So, what I like to do is really start to help, and I utilize a neuroscience based frameworks and tools that really help guys see that and also really start to connect to more of who they are. If you're listening to this, I had a 4 week master class that's pretty powerful. I'll put it in the show notes and a link that you could sign up for and do at your own pace. And with that, you actually get a free one-on-one session with me and a habit of thinking assessment, which will actually help you start to see what thinking processes are supporting you and helping you in ways and what may be sabotaging you and working against what you're really trying to do. The path to restoration isn't an outside job, it's an inside out approach. I kind of call it the inside out transformation, and where awareness replaces the avoidance, where integration, what I mean by integration, because I'm using these terms that may not relate, is when you start to really utilize this and inside here replaces that fragmentation. And I think, when guys think about it, we talk about it, is these are parts of ourselves that we silo, right? And then when we start to really connect to who we are and learn, right, who we are, often guys, and I'll be honest, I'm like, hey, what do you really want? And they'll come up with things, but their decisions and things that they like, they've lost, like really disconnected from a lot of these pieces of themselves. So and then we start to give yourself being present and starting to learn to settle the nervous system, right? And start to understand what is showing up and what emotions may be there, right? So there's a different definition of the strength that we need to move forward. Often when we're looking for strength, it's like, I got this, I could do this alone. That's strong. Let me be the strong one. And being strong is just being able to be grounded and being clear and being open and starting to be more honest and authentic. I often hear that, like, about authenticity. I just want to be more authentic. And that's a very interesting concept because really what that means to me and what I hear is I just want to be more of who I am and be able to do that. And most men aren't really taught these skills and how to do that. And so I encourage you, reach out if this resonated. Wherever you see this, make a comment, connect with me. You could connect at Todd at toddangelucci.com or visit my website at toddangelucci.com. I'd love to hear more about it, what's going on. Or if you're really interested and this resonated and you want to get some clarity and understanding, I have this pathway to alignment session that really starts you in the direction of understanding and discovering really what you want and how to actually move in the direction of getting it without the typical things that you see out there in many programs for men, like create discipline, push, improve. Do I think we need to take action? 100%. But the ways that we're working haven't been sustainable, and it just winds up leaving men feeling more frustrated and then becoming alone again. So I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you for tuning in, and feel free to share this with anybody that may get some use out of it. Thanks.